Welcome to Plain Talk, and today we're going to talk about an issue that we've talked about on the show before, which is our state's last redistricting, which has been caught up in the courts. In fact, the federal courts imposed a new district map on us on the premise that the map that the legislature produced did not sufficiently enhance Native American votes. Essentially, our friends at the Turtle Mountain Reservation wanted a different map. They wanted a district that concentrated Native American votes more into a singular district, and the courts agreed with them. But all of that, as it stands now, the Eighth Circuit has dismissed that lawsuit. So everything's up in the air. And I think we're actually still using the map that the court imposed, although for a hot minute, the state was going to be using its old map, but it's all tied up in the courts. Eventually, I think that this is going to the United States Supreme Court. Now, recently, there was a letter to the editor of the Minot Daily News that was written by a lawmaker that was affected by this. That's former state senator Judy Estenson. Her letter reads, "In 2022, I was honored to be elected by the people of District 15 to serve in the North Dakota State Senate. Representing my community was one of the greatest privileges of my life, and I worked hard to uphold the trust voters placed in me. My 4-year term was cut short, not by the voters, but by a federal court order. A lawsuit challenged the legislative district boundaries, claiming that the map drawn by our legislature diluted the voting power of Native American communities. The court accepted that argument and imposed a new map after giving the legislature just 30 days to withdraw the map at a time when the legislature was not in session, making compliance virtually impossible. Under that plan, the area near Spirit Lake, where I live, was removed from District 15 and combined with Turtle Mountain into a newly created District 9. At the time, District 15 was redrawn and filled through a mid-cycle election that was never supposed to happen. Until now, I've largely remained silent as this case worked its way through the courts, but I cannot be silent any longer. I am deeply frustrated that a judge's decision could undo the will of the voters who elected me in 2022. I am angry that a mid-cycle court order forced me from office, deprived District 15 of its chosen senator, and reshipped this District 9 in a way that made it nearly impossible for me or any Republican to win." She continues, "My issue is not with the individuals who now serve or the voters who elected them. They acted under rules in place at the time. My concern is with the process that disregarded existing representation and injected race-based division into our political system." And I gotta say, Judy, that last line really resonated with me because I agree with it. I don't think that I don't think the courts have been helpful in this process. I think that the way the law, or at least the courts are interpreting the law, is unhelpful to a fair redistricting process. But anyway, I liked your letter. I wanted to get you on to talk about that as we're heading into another election cycle, 2026. Our legislative map's still in the air. I mean, we are halfway through the decade-long period in between U.S. censuses that we do redistricting, although I guess these days some states are doing it more often. We're halfway through, and our map in North Dakota is still not settled.
Yeah, Rob, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. One of the reasons that I wrote the letter after being silent while this has been going on is that I've been very frustrated that I keep reading articles that are from the tribe's perspective about how this is right and how it's going and how they need this to happen and stay the way it is. And I have not heard the state respond. I haven't heard Michael Howe, and I haven't heard the legislature defend the districting that they did when in 2021. And I think that it's really frustrating to not have them defend the fact that I do not believe they intentionally diluted the vote at all. In fact, as you know, Turtle Mountain was very happy to have their district divided into an A and B. In fact, their then Senator Marcellet voted for that redistricting map. So I felt like it's like a one-sided story all the time, and there's another side to this story, and that is that there's not necessarily equal protection for those of us who are now a very, very small minority in this District 9. And of course, it is me as well, and I have lost my seat. So there's a lot of things happening, and you're right, it's all up in the air. But I think that hopefully we're going to get some responses. I'm not sure if you're aware of the Louisiana case that's being set to be heard this fall in the Supreme Court. So there is a redistricting case that was heard last March, and then the courts held it over to the fall, and they're looking at getting more information from the two sides on what they think is happening with the 14th and 15th Amendment. And I'm not a constitutional a lawyer, so I don't want to say anything incorrectly, but I actually went back and reviewed all of those. These things have been disputed and argued by lawyers, by intelligent people who know the Constitution for years. And I think the courts are sort of tired of the litigation, and I think they want to settle something. So this Louisiana case is going to be something to watch. It was very similar to ours. The case was brought forward. They had to do a really goofy, if you think our map is a little goofy looking, you should see Louisiana's, to sometimes try to make effort to actually get the minority to be able to win. And I think the problem with that is that, Rob, I don't think all white people vote the same, and I don't think all Black people vote the same, and I don't think all any race are all the same, right? I think it's just the color of our skin. It's like the color of our eyes or the color of our hair, and we should get past that. And so
Yeah. So I'm gonna jump in here a little bit because unlike Rob, I didn't love your op-ed. I will be honest, the second paragraph where you say I campaigned hard across a district that stretched more than 100 miles. A district more than 100 miles is not abnormal in North Dakota. That's, out west and in central North Dakota, that's normal. But the second part of this is just factually not true. But the new map created a political environment where Republicans could simply not prevail.
well,
Nope, let me finish. How many votes did you lose by? The answer is 1,260. And there was a House Republican who ran in the exact same district that lost by 36 votes.
I can explain that.
Well, you can, but you can't say a Republican simply can't win when a Republican came within 36 votes of winning in 2024.
Well, I'll tell you, it's complicated. I looked at all the numbers again, just like you did, and I think what's really interesting is, number one, what made it really, really hard, I want you to know, is number one, I found two what I consider to be excellent Native American candidates, so that if color mattered, that maybe we could still prevail.
So a Republican could prevail in that district.
I was hoping that was possible. Okay. So I get two Native Americans. One was Rob Graywater from Spirit Lake, and one was Doc Breen, who has been a tribal chairman up in Turtle Mountain. Okay. So I have two great candidates, and I think even if I can't win, one of these two guys should win. They're Native Americans. They're well known in their communities. I obviously, when you say 100 miles away, I campaigned in every city in Rolette County. So I drove the 100 miles, but I had no connections. I knew no people. I had no connection. No connection.
Judy, this isn't about you, right? It's about the voters. And so
It's
again,
about
I'm
the
asking the
voters.
question,
So
how can you say that the
continue.
map was written in a way, drawn in a way that a Republican can't win when one of your Republican running mates came within 36 votes? That's
Okay.
like one of the top 2 or 3 closest elections in the state. Seems to me they drew a pretty competitive district.
It's really interesting. Let me finish. Doc Breen was well known in both tribes. Therefore, if you look at the votes from Benson County to Rolette County, what you'll see is Doc Breen really garnered a considerable number of votes. Typically, if you look at it, Colette Brown, who's from Spirit Lake, actually wins the vote in Rolette County.
I think you're bringing us down in the
No,
weeds.
just a minute.
What
Let
I'm
me-
hearing
let
you
me
say is that if there's a strong Republican candidate, they can win in this district.
It would be
So
unlikely.
that makes what you said in the op-ed inaccurate.
It's very unlikely. So
36 votes.
let me tell you from the previous vote, I want you to know this. So let's go to this argument. Their argument when they decided to join with Spirit Lake in this lawsuit was that their vote had been diluted and they had lost their Senate seat, right? Kent Weston had won. And if you look at the votes from 22 to 24, there was over 1,200 more votes.
I'm just going to let this go after this. There are probably about 40 districts in the state that are drawn in a way that a Democrat can't win because there's too many Republicans. And that district came within.
I would challenge you on that and wonder how, in many parts of the state, how you could draw a district.
That's my point. This district was within 36 votes of Republican winning. To hear Republicans whining, it's drawn in a way that makes it impossible for Republicans. I'm old enough to remember after the 2000 census when Al Carlson drew a district and said, I just drew 3 more Republican seats. So it's just not true. That line is just not true, that it's not a competitive race for Republicans.
I am less concerned about partisan outcomes in this than
as you should, because that's what the Voting Rights Act is about. It's not about partisanship. The op-ed made it about partisanship.
Okay, but it is about race.
Of course.
That's the thing that bothers me deeply about what the courts are doing, is we are assuming that we're not supposed to draw lines that favor one race over another, except it's okay when we draw lines that favor some races over other races. I think anytime you start to make this about race, you cannot do anything but draw lines that are going to cost one race or are going to promote one race at the expense of another. And I think that's harmful to our state. I think that's harmful to our society. I think it's a fundamentally bogus premise. Every North Dakota voter, every American voter should be treated the same by this process. I don't like the idea of people playing partisan games. I'm going to draw the lines to get partisan advantage. That's bogus. But I struggle, and what really I struggle with is I think that the legislature, when they drew, I didn't like the sub-districts. I'll say that. Because I think it's absurd that if I live in District 9A, I get to vote for one senator and one House representative. But if I actually live where I actually live is District 5, I get to vote for 2 House members and 1 senator.
Listen, I kind of agree with that. I think every district should have sub-districts.
Sure.
That's where I'm at.
Let's pick a lane, one or the other. Yep. I'm agnostic about that, but let's treat everybody the same. Mm-hmm. But what I really struggle with is I think our legislature did a good job. I think they've tried to draw the lines fair. And in fact, it did produce more Native American elected to the legislature. And then despite those good faith efforts, we use the Voting Rights Act, the plaintiffs in this case use the Voting Rights Act to paint North Dakota as a racist place that was trying to Native American voters. I think that's unfair. I think it's fundamentally unfair.
Thank you, Rob. I think that's what bothers me too, is that it looks as though they have claimed that the legislature didn't make good effort to try to do things correctly and give them what they wanted. And then when they didn't get the outcome they wanted, they continued to sue us. But, there was only 2 counties. You talk about Republicans and Democrats and how hard it is for Democrats to get elected in North Dakota. I recognize that that's true because we are a conservative state. There were only 2 counties in 24 that voted for Biden, 2 of them. One was Rolette County. Rolette County had the vast majority of the population. Rolette County has voted for Democrats and had Democrats elected for the last 40 or 60 years. They've had representation, not always Native American, but always Democrats. So they did continue in that vein, obviously. And all 3 Democrats that they had up for election won. Doc was the only one that was even close in it, and that's because he was well known in both
But again, any district where there's a candidate who's well known in their communities is going to be more successful regardless of party.
Correct. Correct.
I notice you're bringing up
no disagreement.
I notice you're bringing up partisanship again when this is not. These lines are not about partisanship.
I wish it weren't about partisanship, but as you know, the legal teams that come in and bring these lawsuits forward actually are created to get more Democrats.
So Yeah, let's talk about that, because I think they're actually there to get more Native Americans elected. I feel like we're sort of interjecting.
I don't think. I don't know. I think a lot of these activist lawyers
let me finish my point.
care about Native American voters insofar as it's advantageous for Democrats.
The Senate is 42-5. I don't think there's a big push to switch things here. In the
but
Senate.
North Dakota is
There's one
not
more
the only
seat.
place where these.
Okay, so
these
but
legal
let me.
efforts
So
are playing
we're
out.
talking a lot about the people who brought forward the lawsuit and ignoring the Trump-appointed judge who agreed with them. I mean, this isn't just all these out-of-state attorneys came in here and decided this is the way it should be. A judge made this determination. Peter Welty, a Trump-appointed judge. Y'all can't just ignore that part of it.
I'm not ignoring it. I like Peter Welty. I think he's I knew him before he was a federal judge. I think he's a great person. He's fundamentally wrong on this. His hands are also tied by the fact that the Voting Rights Act is a complete mess, as well as the jurisprudence around it.
So let's make the Voting Rights Act and stop complaining about judges.
Okay, let's stop complaining about the judge. I agree, but I have a problem with a single judge being able to overturn all the constituents and all of the legislature. So that is a little bit of a problem. The Eighth Circuit has overturned the case. Unfortunately, what they argued was who can bring these suits.
Right. It's not about the map. It's about who can bring forward
Correct.
the case.
And I don't really like that. I mean, I like it, but I mean, because the Eighth Circuit had set a precedence, and so that's why North Dakota probably chose that argument, right? But I don't like that. Fundamentally, I'm with Rob, and I just think race should no longer be a factor at all in districting. It just shouldn't.
But that takes us back to that takes us potentially back to Jim Crow era sort of laws where that's why we have that's why we have the Voting Rights Act, right? I mean, after the last census, the lines were drawn and the map that got thrown. It was the first time in 50 years North Dakota didn't have a Native American senator, while Native Americans are 10% of the state. Do we think North Dakota is properly representing Native Americans if we don't have any senators that are Native American?
You're talking about one. I think Senator Marcellet might have won re-election if the tribe hadn't switched their tribal election away from the state election.
Correct.
I think that had more to do with Senator Marcellet losing than any of these other I think that was a very hyper-local issue why he lost that election, and it didn't have anything to do with any of the stuff that we're talking about. One thing that in terms of the Voting Rights Act and the courts and everything, I don't think it's okay to draw a district that enhances the voting power of white people. I think that's fundamentally wrong. But I also don't think it's okay to draw a district that enhances the voting power of Native Americans. I think that's fundamentally wrong too. If you believe one is wrong, I think you have to believe that the other is wrong. But that's what the Voting Rights Act compels us to do. And the solution to this, I think, is legislation. Congress needs to rework the Voting Rights Act because it is a mess.
The Republicans have control of both chambers and the president. Fix it.
Yeah, they can't even keep the government open right now. So that's a pretty tall order.
All right.
Judy's become a spectator, and Chad and I.
I really enjoy listening to the argument. Obviously, I'm more with Rob. I don't think that there's any fairness in looking at color as you make these districts. If you look at the fact that he doesn't want to make it partisan, and I'd like to not make it partisan either, but the evidence is that they were one of two counties that voted blue in North Dakota in the last election. So there is a partisanship there. There is a thoughtfulness. I think it's changing. I want you to know that at Spirit Lake, it was not, I don't know if I want to say partisanship, but it wasn't racial. They actually elected the 3 Republican candidates in the Benson County. So, I mean, it does matter. And it will take years, I believe, for people to start to actually analyze what their politics is. But we all know for years, the minorities have voted Democrat.
So I would just say it's easy for 3 white people to stand on here and say that racial representation shouldn't matter. And I think it's important, again, that we have a wide spectrum of perspectives, be it young people, be it old people, be it women, be it people of color, that are representing the whole state in the legislature. And so I think that's an important thing to take into consideration. Again, we've got some privilege here on this call, not understanding what's happening with people of color. So I'll leave it at that.
I think as intelligent people, we can understand that nobody should feel marginalized by these jurisdictions. I don't think anybody on this call wants that. I think we should stop drawing lines based on race, and it doesn't matter which race we're promoting. That's it. Judy, one thing while we had you on, you ran for ag commissioner in the past. This is a little off topic, not why we brought you on, but I'm interested in your perspective on this because we talked about it a little bit on the Wednesday show. You ran for ag commissioner one time. You and your husband are involved in production agriculture. And I'm interested in if you saw some of Ag Commissioner Doug Goring's comments about doom and gloom in farmers saying, essentially, tariffs are adding costs. They're inflating the price of goods and services. I know that you're a Republican. I know that you support Donald Trump, but here we have some of our ag commissioners saying some of Trump's policies are hurting farmers in North Dakota. Someone obviously who has campaigned in that space, who makes their living in that space. How do you feel about some of that?
I think I would say that my 3 sons and my husband are still very supporting of Donald Trump and what he's trying to do. I think they too are waiting to see what the final outcome of all this is. I think they're recognizing that there's risk and still optimistic that it could work out for the best. And that's all I hear them say. I made a comment to my one of my sons the other day. I said, I've read predictions that 20 to 30% of small farmers could, go out of business and not be able to continue to get operating costs and those kinds of things. And he said, yep, that's what I hear. But, we do what you do, and you're bringing in the crop and you're hoping you get a good price for it. And that's what farmers do. I mean, there's always been good years and less than, but, some years that are less good, right? Or not as good. And you continue on. And I think that that's their attitude, is that we'll wait and see. We're going to have to just wait and see. Just like Doug Goring, you can see some problems, but it doesn't really show you the end result, right? And I don't think anyone really knows what the end result will be of all these tariffs. I certainly don't.
But we are starting to see input costs getting more expensive.
Definitely.
That sort of thing. I mean, one of the things that sort of confuses me is the idea that, sort of supporting this guy who's potentially putting a third of people in your industry out of business. Like, it's like, at what point do your sons and your husband say, hey, we got to advocate for ourselves here because these tariffs are potentially putting us out of business? I mean, when should farmers and ranchers sort of push back on this stuff so they don't wait until it's too late and they're out of business? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't.
Absolutely. It's a really great question. What's interesting is that, from my perspective, I would look at it and say, this doesn't look good. Maybe we should sell. Maybe we should get out of this business, right? That is not what how typical farmers look at it. I don't know at what point we should scream, we give up, because I think my husband and even my sons feel like other countries have taken advantage of the US of A for a very, very long time. And how do we correct that without, like you said, squeezing and hurting our 1/3 of our agriculture sector? So, of course, nobody likes to be squeezed, right? Nobody likes the pain. I don't know what the answer is. I can't see into the future. There's economists that are way smarter than I am. I only know my own little personal situation here, and I haven't heard too much from my guys, just really saying this is enough. This is not working for us. But I don't know. I don't know how the rest of the egg community looks at it. I'm sure there's people who are very concerned.
One thing that I mean, a farm or a ranch isn't like another business. I mean, it's one thing if you open a coffee shop and the foot traffic's not there, the revenues aren't there, and you just say, okay, well, I'm going to close down this coffee shop because it's just not working. Most of us don't live in the coffee shop.
Yeah.
Most of us don't have generations of our families that lived in the coffee shop. So making that decision, there's a reason why farmers and ranchers fight to the better end. It's not just their businesses, it's their homes, it's their way of life, it's their culture. And where do they go after they leave the farm?
But I think, Rob, one of my questions is when you start pushing back on the administration.
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump owes a couple of elections to rural America voting for him. And rural America's taking it on the chin right now. You could argue they took it on the chin in the first term too for a little while. I guess I'm wondering. I mean, is there a point at which it feels like rural voters are voting against their own interests?
Well, I would hope that Donald Trump is concerned about a third of the population that are in agriculture or affected by agriculture, right? So, I think I hate to say this, but my best guess is he's smarter than I am. And I maybe you question that, but
I think you're pretty smart, Judy. I think you're a lot smarter, but that's just
well,
I noticed he didn't offer his thoughts on the intelligence of the president as part of that analysis.
trying to be nice.
I thought that was probably the case. Thanks, Rob. But I don't know how to answer that. But let's go back to where we were, because I just want to finish, and I know we're probably close to our time being up, and that is that I love the Native Americans. I have great Native American friends. I have people that have supported me and campaigned for me out here in Spirit Lake. It was a very, very different thing up on the reservation at Turtle Mountain. It's hard. I want people to know how hard it is for somebody to go and campaign up there, knock on doors up there, because it's all, if you visit them, ooh, now I got somebody driving in my yard. That doesn't, but that it's spread out. It's a difficult thing to do up there. So I did my very best. I knocked on doors in every community, and I tried to introduce myself. And I believe it was impossible to win because I lost by 1,200 votes, but there were 1,200 more votes than there was in the last election.
Well, I think everybody who participated in this conversation wants every North Dakotan, Native Americans, Jews, blacks, Hispanics, whites, everybody to do well and everyone to feel like
yes, and I'm like him. I want us to win elections by our character and what we present, and I don't want it to have anything to do with the color of our skin. And I'm the minority now, and so I do recognize what it feels like to be a minority. And so, but the thing I want you to know is I ran against Colette Brown in 22. She never stepped into Ramsey County and knocked on a door. You can't win an election just by thinking that the people of your color are going to elect you either. And that is wrong.
Well, Judy, I appreciate you coming on. It's an interesting conversation. Like I said, I think we all want to end up in the same place. We just got some different ideas on how to get there.
We always want to get to the same place. We just have different ideas. I agree. And you know what? Nobody but me is more willing to work with whoever I am working with to get to the right answer. So I appreciate being on your show today.
Judy, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Judy.